And we're going to call this meeting to order. House Governmental Affairs Full Committee. And our first order of business will be to hear from Representative Sims regarding House Bill 834. House Bill 834, which is, I believe, Representative Sims, LC 33. Actually, there's a sub for this, correct? And it is on our desk. LC 335541S, members. It was on top of your folder. LC 335541S. Are you ready? All right.
Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I'm bringing to you this afternoon a House Bill 834 is another one of these population acts that have reared its ugly head again to affect a county that does not wish to have this proposal of the Population Act that was passed several years ago when they were constitutional, and these bills now are not non-constitutional. What this bill does is allow the counties in the 800,000 to 900,000 population of the census. If we repeal this act, it gives them the right to have their special bond referendums when they want to have them, rather than the way it is now. What we did in the substitute was it said it ended at line 8. It just said repealing subsection B1. And all we did was add subsection B1 so that you could see exactly what they were repealing there. I mean, what the bill did. We're just repealing again the code section in there, and letting these folks have their election for their bonds when they want to have them. And this actually was a bill, if you don't know the history of population acts, this was something that was intended only for Fulton County. And now it involves Cobb and DeKalb and Gwinnett. So, along with Fulton. I'll stand for any questions.
Looks like you have a question. Chairman Powell.
No, I was just saying at the appropriate time.
All right. Sounds like it's the appropriate time. We don't have any other questions.
I'd make a motion to pass.
Second.
By substitute. Correct, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
All right. So we are looking again at House Bill 834. And it's LC 335541S, the substitute. We have a motion do pass and a second. All in favor? Any other discussion? Excuse me. None? All right. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, like sign. All right. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Moves on to rules. Our second bill today will be House Bill 833. Representative Jones. I'm looking at LC 371644. And whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chairwoman and committee. This is a very simple bill. We're calling it the slum bill. Many years ago, we put in our legislation to allow for municipalities to create zones for tax incentives, federal tax grants, things of that sort. The problem is, and this came specifically out of my Douglas County delegation, because in Douglas County they wanted to have an area that was eligible for these tax incentives to make growth, but no one wanted their home to be in a slum area. No one really wants to live in a slum. So the federally accepted and approved language is blight, a blighted area. Not too much better than slum, but still better than slum. So what we're asking the committee to do is to approve this bill, which would just change in the Georgia Code and update it to meet the federal standards. In the subcommittee, the main issue that I was concerned about, as well as the subcommittee, was whether or not we're going to mess up our own funds. And so I only printed one copy to save a tree, but here are some of the federal guidelines for HUD and some other places in which they refer to everything usually as slight/blight, a slum/blight. So either way, we will be protected. The municipalities will be able to designate these areas and get these funds. This is a bipartisan measure. Representative Micah Gravely is in another committee, but he wanted me to let you all know that it has all of our full support, and we ask for a favorable approval of this bill.
Thank you. And do we have a question or perhaps a motion, Chairman Powell? A motion. What would that motion be? Motion do pass. Do we possibly have a question? We do have a question. Representative Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just want to make sure this is correcting the language, not just for your county, although it originated there. It will affect all throughout the state.
The entire state of Georgia, yes,
Thank you. I just wanted that clarified.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? No discussion? All right. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, like sign. All right. The motion carries. And congratulations. It'll move on to rules.
Thank you, Committee.
We have another measure before us. And at this time, we will take, we're going to take House Bill 979. House Bill is a substitute, 979, LC 295929S, and it was also on top of your folder. LC 295929S, substitute to House Bill 979.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chairman Jacobs.
Members of the committee. I bring before you today House Bill 979. Just the brief history, as you'll recall, back in 2011, we passed a bill that requires school boards in certain school districts, and this really applies by the way it's defined, to DeKalb and Rockdale counties to go from 9 to no more than 7 members. This was in the same legislation that gave the governor the power to suspend a school board if its accreditation level is put on a level just above accreditation loss, meaning probation. And at the time that that was to go into effect at the beginning of 2013. Senator Fran Miller, then brought an amendment to that was passed in that year, or maybe the year before that, to push that deadline out to 2015. We are now upon the qualifying period for the 2015 elections. The issue is simply this, and I should preface this by saying that as you all know, unfortunately, and I think it's an unfortunate thing that frankly this is something that had to be dealt with at the state level. But 6 out of the 9 members of the DeKalb County School Board were removed by the governor because our school system was put on probation. The good news is that new school board has now moved us up a notch, and the trajectory under Superintendent Michael Thurmond and the new school board is a good one. We just want to make sure that we have some continuity, and the key is this. Right now, at this very moment, we have a mandate in state law that requires the DeKalb County School Board to go to 7 members as of the upcoming, for the upcoming election and the terms that begin at the beginning of 2015. Right now, as a matter of local legislation, we have a 9-district plan, meaning there is no local act in place that contains districts that comply with the general state law. The saving grace here is that the plan that we do have contains 7 single-member districts that encompass all of the county together, and 2 super districts, each of which encompass half the county. What the bill you have in front of you will do as a matter of general legislation for this upcoming election is divide that plan into 7 and 2 and proceed forward with qualifying in 2 weeks for the 7 single-member seats that are mandated by state law to exist. Bottom line is we already have 7 districts. and they are drawn according to the numbers in the 2010 census. But the way our plan is currently written as a matter of local law does not comply with the general statute. This will make it comply with the general statute so that we can have some continuity for the 2014 elections.
Representative Oliver.
Representative Jacobs, is it also true that this general bill will become, if passed, will become effective only on the contingency that a local bill is not passed? I think if we look at line 25, I think that clarifies that. And that's your intent, isn't it?
Well, it's in essence a stop. I mean, we have to have some clarity prior to the qualifying period. And for at least the first 2 years that the new board would take office. So basically, if a local act is not passed, enacted into law prior to the qualifying period, 2 weeks from today, then these 7 districts will stand until the beginning of 2015, in which case they can be changed.
I think my point is, because I'm in support of your bill, is that this is really a belts and suspenders issue. We really are just being, I personally, because I'm really conservative, is be very careful about not having the opportunity for people to qualify 2 weeks from today. Is it 2 or 3 weeks from today?
2.
Very soon.
That is correct. We don't want the DeKalb Board of Elections to have any confusion as to what these districts are supposed to be, which is going to be the state of affairs 2 weeks from now, unless we provide some clarity. And then, yes, the answer to Representative Oliver's question is that, after this is done, it can absolutely be changed by local act.
All right. Representative Mosby.
So if the local delegation passes a map after this time period, but within this legislative session and before day 35, it will not be considered for approval based on this particular.
Well, it couldn't. I mean, the problem is that if we pass a local act on day 35, qualifying has occurred already. I mean, and that's the problem. I mean, the real problem, Representative Mosby, is that right now there's not even a bill introduced. I mean, if we really want to get down to brass tacks, the real problem is there's not even a bill introduced, and we have 7 legislative days starting tomorrow before qualifying. So unless one is to be passed, and it will require 5 days simply to pass a bill, I mean, we're literally at the witching hour at this point.
So if we pass a map before the qualifying, do we need this piece of legislation?
The answer to if we pass a bill and it were signed into law by the governor before qualifying, then no, this legislation would not be necessary.
And you're not confident that we can do that?
What my understanding, of course, I was in another meeting at the time of today's delegation meeting, but my understanding is that the next meeting on that matter is to be Thursday. I don't know whether that causes a bill to be introduced. I don't know whether a bill is going to be introduced prior to that or not, but Thursday is probably too late. Because at that point, as of Thursday, there will only be 4 legislative days left. Look, I would prefer not to be doing this way, but the reality is that we're now at a point where 2 weeks from today, the folks who administer DeKalb County's elections need to know what those districts are going to be in order to qualify people to run in them.
I'm done.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Number 10, Representative.
Appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay. All right. Is that time?
I move 879 by substitute do pass.
It's 979. Yes. 979 by substitute do pass, and we have a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, like sign. All right. The bill moves forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members
You
of the
are
committee.
very welcome. And next up is House Bill 704. Representative Bruce will be coming forward, and I'd like to share with the committee where we left it with the subcommittee, no, with the full committee before, excuse me, is that we are in discussions with South Fulton right now, and the question is, are we going to waive our rules of the committee in order to allow this bill to move forward? And at this time, we actually do have a motion by Representative Oliver. If you will, please move forward with your motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had a very good discussion at our committee meeting last week about the efficacy of Rule 3 of our committee and the way in which we have honored that rule, and the extent to which, in my motion to move forward to waive that will, excuse me, that bill on behalf of 704, I wanted to be clear in my motion that this is a very narrow determination this committee is making. So, Madam Chair, I ask this committee to consider a motion that House Bill 704, which provides the voters of South Fulton an opportunity to decide whether to become a city, an action that requires introduction in the first year of a biennial and passage in the second year by Committee Rule 3 be waived. My basis for that is that previous legislation has been enacted in the year prior to 2013 to create a city of South Fulton. The voters of South Fulton have had an opportunity to review, pass upon, and in fact vote in relation to that proposal previously, and that 704 further in its uniqueness represents the last territory, the last ground acreage that exists in the county of Fulton that has not been put into a city. I think further that the majority of the Fulton County delegation does support this. I have had no one come to me in opposition. I don't know whether someone will testify today in opposition to 704, but I believe the uniqueness of the South Fulton history of legislation for the proposal of a new city gives me a basis and this committee a basis to move that Rule 3 be waived and 704 be allowed to move forward for a vote before the committee.
All right, we have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. So now we're going to have a discussion. Chairman Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to, I appreciate Representative Oliver doing that. I appreciate all the work that y'all put in there, and I told you earlier I didn't want to be the one to stand in this, and I'm not going to stand in the way of this. I just want to further clarify, because I do know that there are other cityhood bills out there, and it will be coming here, and I want to make it even extra clear that those are extraordinary circumstances, and I even want to say just because they happen to meet all those same extraordinary circumstances, that would not guarantee waiving of Rule 3, because I think it really is critical, and I just want to be on record of making sure that we all understand that this is a very extreme situation that we're doing this. So, extreme.
Unique.
Thank you.
All right, so any other discussion about the motion that we have here on the table? So we have a motion to waive Rule 3 of the committee and a second. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, like sign. Okay, so now, gentlemen, will you please tell us more about your bill so that we can inform the committee about South Fulton?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee members, for your
Only if you haven't told us before.
for your graciousness and your understanding of the uniqueness of this situation. As we've said previously, this area in South Fulton represents the remaining area that is not incorporated into an existing city in Fulton County, and the voters deserve and have asked for an opportunity to have a referendum for self-determination, and that's essentially what we're providing them with House Bill 704.
Okay. And I, too, want to say thank you to the committee. I know that this was a difficult thing, so I really do appreciate it, as do the people in South Fulton County, because they do want to have an opportunity to decide for themselves whether they want to be part of a city or not. And without going through all of the things that we went through before, I know most of the committees have already heard from us that this is just clearly an opportunity to give people a chance to determine their own destiny. And we really appreciate the opportunity for the vote.
Representative Powell, or Chairman Powell, excuse me.
I have a question, and maybe the committee heard this when they had the previous hearing, but unfortunately I wasn't here. Looking at the map, and I can understand that if all of Fulton County has now been municipalized, that we don't want to leave any part that is not. But why are these little stranded little tendrils in this map not being annexed into another city that is adjacent to the proposed city, rather than being just sort of whatever's left being municipalized in this city?
Unfortunately, you know, the cities pick and choose what they want in the past, and they pick those areas that were going to be beneficial to their city, and left out some of the pieces that they, I guess, felt weren't going to be beneficial. But we're going to address all of that. You know, we'll have to do that under separate legislation, but we will deal with that. But right now, we were trying to give the individuals that live in this unincorporated area the opportunity to decide before those cities continue to pick and choose which pieces they want and create more of those islands. So that's what we're trying to avoid going forward.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to ask Dan O'Connor to come forward and just, on behalf of the reapportionment office, to really talk to us more about what happened last time, so that we would just have some background on this bill and South Fulton as it went before.
Okay. Yeah, just for public information, I'm Dan O'Connor. I'm a data analyst with the reapportionment office, and Gina Wright, our director, couldn't be here today, but she wanted me to make a presentation just on some background on population and other information on South Fulton. The following data provides some technical information related to the proposed city of South Fulton, described in House Bill 704 by substitute that is presently before your committee. As drawn, South Fulton would take in all unincorporated pieces of Fulton County and would have a total population of 87,478 people. This data is based off of 2010 census totals, which is the only official data that can be used for redistricting purposes throughout this decade. A population of this size would make this new city the 9th largest city in Georgia, behind other Fulton cities of Atlanta, Sandy Springs, and Roswell. The map as drawn contains 9 non-contiguous pieces, the largest of which are the unconnected pieces of the city with 31,700 people in it, and contains all the proposed districts 6 and 7 and part of District 5, as you see on the attached map. There are 5 islands that have no population in them, and the others have populations respectively of 93, 5, and 2 people. These areas are completely surrounded by another city, or in 2 cases by one city on one side and a different city on the other. Attached map shows the proposed 7 city council districts for South Fulton, and these districts in their entirety make up the city limits. The statistics sheet shows the breakdown of population for each district and the demographic information by district. In reference to previous cities created by the General Assembly, only one of the 7 new cities formed since 2005 went to a committee other than governmental affairs. The city of Peachtree Corners was assigned to intergovernmental coordination in 2011, but was treated as a general bill due to House Rule 50. I have attached a chart that shows the details related to those previous bills, and if there are any questions, feel free to contact Gina Wright, our director. So basically, as I said, this would be the 9th largest city in the state, just behind, I think, Roswell, and then Sandy Springs would be 7th. This would be the 9th largest of our municipalities.
All right. Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. Anyone want to have a question for Mr. O'Connor, actually? For Dan? Representative Taylor, are you the one? Okay, go ahead.
Again, I have questions about the map. I don't know who all has a copy of the map, but I'm trying to figure out what part and why we have these little islands floating out there. This looks to be a problem. You could literally, can you explain that, why it was done this way?
Yeah, Representative Taylor, basically the issues you have in South Fulton is you have Palmetto, Union City, and Fairburn make up a lot of the Interstate 85 corridor, like between the 285 and 85 intersection till you get to Coweta County. And basically what you have is those are just the last unincorporated areas left in South Fulton. So you have, again, you have Palmetto, Union City, and Fairburn, and it's just because, as Representative Bruce pointed out, a lot of the cities have kind of, taken certain parcels. There's just other areas that have been left unincorporated, so that's why it just ends up being that way.
Okay, like number 1, that bluish color area, what is that?
Well, that area is along Fulton Industrial Boulevard, south of Interstate 20, taking a lot of that area.
Okay, number 2?
Taking areas below there, like off Campbellton Road, 166, going that way.
Okay, and are these all going to be part of the new city?
Yes, ma'am. Each district would have roughly about 12,500 people.
Right. Now, what about this big empty place right here? Nobody wants them? What is it?
Already taken
It's
by
already
cities,
a city? It's
yeah.
surrounded, what is it? What city?
Probably you're talking about Union City and Fairburn, the largest
Okay, so
two.
that's Union City, and it's going to be surrounded by another city? Okay.
And got Fairburn right next to that, too.
And the same thing in this section right in here, again?
6 and 7?
Well, I guess it's between 4 and 5.
Right.
Okay, and then this little above between 5 and 6. Are those other little cities?
Right.
If I can make a point, we have, that issue exists now, what you're talking about, because there's a separate police force, separate fire department that services the area that's in color now.
Right.
That's the unincorporated part. So what you're describing already exists. And we are in discussion with the other cities about how we're going to work through that. But right now, time is of the essence in terms of being able to give the people in that entire colored area an opportunity to vote as to whether or not they want to be a city or not before we have more of those islands come into play. That's what we're dealing with. But we're going to address that, exactly what you're talking about, because we want to be able to do it now. But what you're describing already exists.
Well, it just looks like it would be very difficult to manage this type of configuration.
But we're already doing it right now.
For a new city. Okay. Thank you. It just looks very unusual.
Well, yeah, the colors probably distort the way this city is described. The area that is not colored is an existing city, one of several cities.
Right, and I got that. And it's different ones because they're not connected, and I get it. But again, it looks like redheaded stepchildren in here. Nobody wanted them, and y'all are going to incorporate it. It just looks really unusual, that's all.
Right, apparently.
Is there a reason that nobody wanted to pick them up as a city, they just stayed unincorporated, and now we're trying to incorporate them? Okay. Dan, do you have anything to add?
I was just going to add one point. If you look at the cities of Marietta and Smyrna and Cobb County, you also see a lot of those islands like off Highway 120, the Marietta Loop, so there's precedent for other cities being in that situation, too.
And that is how we came up with some of the other newer city in DeKalb. Same type of thing, little islands, and, okay. Don't go there. Thank you.
So if I live on let's say McClure Road and I call 911, the fire department, I have a fire, the Fulton County Fire Department will come take care of me instead of, or I mean it is.
Right now.
Yeah.
The Fulton County Police Department or Fire Department would respond to anything that's not already in the city. And if this bill passes, then the city will respond to everything that's not in another city.
All right. Any other questions for Dan? And then I'm going to call on Chairman Meadows.
I don't need Dan, I need Mr. Flood, Mr. Bruce. And I apologize for maybe missing part of an explanation. What services do you intend to offer these people?
Go ahead. Fire, police, zoning, parks and recreation.
Same services that are being offered by the county
Today.
Are you going to contract with the county for those services or provide them as the city of South Fulton?
It's going to be a transition period. Right now, right now, that area is being taxed through a special service tax district to provide those services. It's just that the county is providing it. But once the city is established over a transition period of time, then it ultimately will be the city.
And I know you've had studies done to come up with what the cost would be, and normally the study comes back with there will be no cost increase, because what I'm paying for those services now, these residents will pay those services
continuously.
Do you know how many cities that's worked in? None. I'll give you the answer. Because you don't generate enough money to provide all the levels of services that you want to. And if you haven't got an agreement with whoever this mess is down here between the green, yellow, and purple and the beige, it's going to be a nightmare.
Well, Mr. Chairman, the reality is that the area is currently paying for the services that it's getting, and it's not getting its share of the special service tax district. The local option sales tax. And once that is done, it will have, according to the study, it will have more than enough money to provide the services at the same level that they're being provided now. The new government in that area would have to determine if they want to provide additional services, and the voters would be able to participate in that process. So
what's unique about this area is that, unlike other areas that are incorporated, those have been counties or unincorporated areas that did not have services already being provided to them. And so this is unique. The services that the city would provide are already services that the county provides. The study, the analysis by Georgia State indicated that the very conservative estimates would be a surplus of $6.5 million and a potential of as much as a $17.8 million surplus.
Those surpluses, is that just going to go out here then and reduce the tax burden of those people in these colored areas?
That's certainly what the newly elected government has that opportunity to decide.
You know how we elected officials are, don't you?
I can only speak for myself.
I know how we are. Personally, I think you've got a service provider nightmare in this wide area.
In the current cities.
Down at the bottom, the one that's surrounded.
That area is already in the city. We would not be impacted in this area.
They provide police protection, not sheriff, police protection to all these areas?
Yes, sir. Each of those cities has a police department.
And the fire
That little section up here between the green and the yellow that's in white. Now who is that piece? The section, the white section between the green and the yellow, between 4 and 3.
We don't have a map in front of us. But
It's the ones that Dan was referring to, reference. Union City?
which area?
The white with stripes between 3 and 4.
That's Union City. Like I said, all of the areas in white are already in a city, already getting police, fire, and everything else.
How in the world?
That's because of the way the city's annexed.
Well, the cities are under restrictions that they can't create islands, and that if that's not an island, I don't know what is.
Mr. Chairman, remember there was a law that allowed them to create those islands many years ago. They don't have to close those islands unless they so desire. That law's been on the books about 25 years ago. As a matter of fact, myself and the majority leader tried to pass it twice the last couple of years. The GMA fought against it.
As well, they should have.
But that's the reason.
Yeah, I think, again, the bottom line to it is that all of the areas that are colored would be part of the new city. All of the areas that are in white are already in a city, already getting police, already getting fire, already getting all the services that we're talking about. And so now we're trying to get the rest of it in there. And we are going to have, if there's a need to have some sort of working relationship with the other cities, because the county will not have any of it when this is done, then we'll do that.
You ever notice that states and cities and counties are very territorial?
We kind of love each other, though.
You lie.
Representative Taylor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Again, what do you anticipate the function of the county being? What is their job going to be in representation for this area?
They will continue to provide all of the services that they're providing now that are not city services. They will not provide police. They will not provide fire, zoning. All of those things will become city functions. They're already special service area functions. Mm-hmm. And so
What's the goal? What's the reason for doing this? If the county's been providing it, are they not doing an adequate job? Well, I'm trying to figure this out. You're just taking all the pieces left over and forming a new city.
Yeah, part of the problem is that the county, the people who are elected to the county mm-hmm. are elected by their districts. You have people in the northern part of the county that are making decisions for what happens in the southern part of the county, and they don't live there. Mm-hmm. And they don't have to live with the consequences of the decisions that they make. They live, all those folks that we're talking about actually live in a city in North Fulton County, and they don't make any decisions about the city that they live in because they're not in that city. So all we're doing is saying, let's let people who live in the area decide what happens in the area and also have to deal with the consequences of those decisions. It's basically just giving the people in the area the opportunity to control what happens to them in their area. That's the bottom line.
Is it changing tax structures? Obviously it will. You'll have a city tax as opposed to a county.
No, we'll have a city tax as opposed to a special service tax district.
Okay, you have a special service tax district.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Representative Williamson.
Just a point of clarification, because I did come to the hearing meeting and got a little bit more bigger overview than what we're picking up in this meeting today. But I just want to reiterate the fact that this proposed legislation, should it pass the General Assembly, only allows the folks in this unincorporated part of the county to vote for a proposed new city. And it's my understanding that a similar vote was held in the past, and the voters decided not to have a new city. But all we're doing with this legislation is allowing those people to decide whether or not they want to be in a city as everybody else in the whole county.
That's correct.
So I just want to make sure that we're stressing the fact that this would enable those people that are in the special service tax districts now, they can elect to vote to stay in those special service tax districts with getting county services, or elect to have their own city.
Correct.
But I agree with the good points about, and I've had this discussion with the author of the bill. It makes 0 sense to me having these islands, these fingers, these it would apparently be more appropriate for the respective cities. Should the citizens in this colored portion of the map vote themselves in a new city, it would make common sense to me to get with the city of, in this case, Union City, and clear up these little islands and swap some land, swap some boundaries, and get it cleaned up. But this is really a local matter for local citizens to decide.
Representative Oliver.
I'd like to make a motion, Madam Chair.
Okay, give me just a minute. Chairman Meadows.
We talked about police and fire, I'm assuming garbage and things like that. Nobody mentioned recreation, nobody mentioned libraries. Are you going to have your own, or is that going to maintain with the county?
Mr. Chairman, the city would provide, as the county does now, parks and recreation, and the libraries would remain with the county.
Just to give you one other, your sales pitch of letting the south, you're thinking the north side made the rules. That was exactly the sales pitch, but just opposite for a couple of your cities to the north.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? All right, Representative Oliver.
I move to pass 704.
We have a motion to pass House Bill 704 and a second. Any other discussion? What? No. Do you have a question, Representative Floyd? Okay.
Anybody signed up to speak on the bill?
Well, we heard it before, but is there anyone who would desperately like to speak on this bill? We have heard all these. Several spoke before. Around 7 or 8 spoke before on the bill. So is there anyone in the audience who would love to speak on this bill? Okay. All right. So any other discussion from the committee? All right. Those in favor of the passage of House Bill, what was it again? 704. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, like sign. All right, so it looks like, gentlemen, you'll be going before the Rules Committee with your bill. May want to talk to that man on the end. That was an unfortunate.
Thank you, committee members.
You're welcome.
Lock the door so we can talk to everybody.
No, we have one more bill. All right, members, we do have one more bill before the committee. House Bill 891. 891. And this is Representative Fleming. Would you like to present from your seat down there? All right, that would be great. I'm turning your mic on now.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to present House Bill 891. House Bill 891 deals with early voting in municipalities and cities in the state of Georgia. probably a few years back when we in Georgia went from about 6 weeks or so, or down to about 3 for early voting. The Georgia Municipal Association came before the legislature and said, please do something to help us. We're struggling financially in many areas, particularly our small cities, and voters' turnout is so much lower generally in municipal elections. 1 week of early voting is enough for us. We didn't make that change for them then. Last October, when, Madam Chair, your committee held hearings on some of the election changes we were going to have to make this year based upon some federal rulings and moving our primary dates, GMA once again came to us and testified before this committee, please do something about the burden of early voting on our local cities and shrink that some for us. I had conversations with them afterwards, and that is a result of the bill that's in front of you today. What the bill does simply is it carves out an exception for cities and says that their early voting can be a Saturday and 1 week before the Tuesday election, rather than the 3 weeks which are required for all other elections, gubernatorial, congressional, presidential, county, and whatnot. So the only thing that this bill affects is city governments across our state. There is a significant financial saving to city governments. Yours probably are like mine. They've been slashing services, laying people off, and raising the millage rates, trying to deal with the recession, and begging for us in Atlanta not to put any more mandates on them and help them out when we can. Well, this is one of those. The Georgia Municipal Association testified at subcommittee that they've done an extensive survey of the cities across the state and found tremendous cost savings, thousands of dollars, which are particularly important when we talk about some of our smaller cities, if they can shrink early voting from 3 weeks down to 1 week. Madam Chair, this is particularly evident in one of my cities, for example, Daring, Georgia, which is like many of the cities in Georgia. 44% of our cities are less than 500 people. They have an election and might have 100 people vote, but yet they're required to pay 3 people per day for 3 weeks to keep the polls open, and for what would be a small amount of money maybe for larger cities is very significant to them. We already, Madam Chair, treat our cities differently when it comes to election law, very differently. They only hold election in odd number of years unless it's a special election, whereas all other elections are even number of years. Cities already, almost all of them, allowed under their charter to run their own elections if they want to, whereas usually county elections are run by a board of elections. We also have nonpartisan elections for all our city elections in Georgia. Most of our cities do not have runoff systems like we do in Georgia. Most are by plurality, although that is left up to the cities themselves under their charter. So we already treat them significantly different, not only in different years, but nonpartisanly. This would be one more difference for them, which would help them financially. GMA testified very strongly in favor of this at the subcommittee. Some other information that came out that of note to the committee: this would not affect most of our, or any of our, consolidated cities in Georgia unless they choose to have it affect them. Ledge Council has confirmed this, and Georgia Municipal Association through their legal research. Our city county consolidated governments get to choose, pick and choose between city and county laws, whichever benefits them the most, which is most of our second-tier cities in Georgia, the large ones: Athens, Columbus, Augusta, Macon, and a few others. So they could actually choose whether or not this would help them or not. After we had our hearings in October, Madam Chair, and I went back and talked not only with GMA extensively about this, but also many of my local cities, lo and behold, the headlines in the Augusta Chronicle in the front page of the Metro section was a comment on one of our cities having an election, and the headline reads, early voting turnout low. So that's what this bill aims to do. The cities across this state have asked for help. This bill helps them financially, particularly the smaller cities, to the tune of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars across the state. It is by their request and allows them to serve their elections, but do it in a financially responsible way for the taxpayers. Madam Chair, that is basically what the bill does. I would mention one thing further. Of course, it has no effect whatsoever on absentee voting. We have very liberal absentee voting in the state of Georgia. You can vote pretty much whenever you want to. Getting close to an election will not affect that at all. GMA, just as of this morning, informed me they had their weekly call once again, doing their informal surveys of their city governments across the state, and found extremely strong support for this, and that it would be a significant cost-saving measure for them. Madam Chair, that's basically what the bill does. I would be happy to answer any questions from members of the committee.
Members of the committee, questions? Chairman Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the author of the bill, it's not true that absentee period presently is 45 days, and so anyone that wanted to vote in this election process, that they actually have 45 days prior to the election of which to cast that particular ballot.
That is absolutely correct.
So this idea that they don't have time, they've got 45 days plus these 6 days. Is it not also further true on lines, starting on line 30, that we've also put a provision in here that, or it's already in there, that if normal business hours are not adequate, that the local municipality has the opportunity to extend those hours so that there's even more time given during that time?
The chairman knows exactly what he speaks, having worked on the previous bills regarding this, and that is flexibility already built into the law should somebody have special circumstances where more time were needed.
And then I guess my final question is, if you would, I've heard anecdotally some numbers, and you may have covered them, I'm sorry if I didn't hear, but I've heard some examples of some municipalities having up to 0 votes in the early voting. Do you have any data that would say that we've got some areas across the state? Obviously, it's not everywhere, but areas where there's some extreme examples of spending a lot of taxpayer money and then people not even showed up at all during the early voting, or at least very minimally?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. In Georgia Municipal Association's survey, the extensive survey that they did of almost 100 cities on this issue, there were several of them, as I look down the list, I'm counting at least 7 or 8 here, that had 0 early voters, and far more many in the single digits.
Is this Representative Brooks? Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Fleming, I just want to know if GMA adopted a resolution urging us to pass this legislation. A formal resolution from GMA?
I know they testified at the hearing in October. I know that they've surveyed their members. I know that they testified in favor of committee. I do not know the answer to that question. They're sitting right over there in the corner of the chair lady.
If there's a resolution from GMA, if anybody here can answer that question, Madam Chair.
Can we do that? Okay, yeah, just acknowledge yes or no.
Madam Chair, my name is Tom Gale. I'm with Georgia Municipal Association, and the way our policy process works is we have various listening sessions in the spring. We have specific policy items that we bring to the legislature and work on those throughout the year. We have a legislative policy council that is our main policy-making body that makes decisions during the legislative session. We don't have a process of adopting formal resolutions on specific issues like this. We have a very extensive policy process and a document that we can bring to you and be glad to share with you, not just policies in municipal government, but across the spectrum. But we don't get into practice of having our membership vote on a specific resolution on a specific subject. We instead have our entire membership vote on specific policies and then give flexibility to our Legislative Policy Council, which has special conference calls but also regular conference calls every Monday morning at 8:30 in the morning. We had one this morning as well, in which this bill was discussed.
So you would think, though, throughout GMA, 535 cities, that you have kind of a mixed attitude in terms of whether or not there should be a reduction of early voting?
Well, you would think that that it'd be hard, just like with this body, to get 180 votes on every single issue. We have 536 cities, 519 members of our organization. To date, we've only heard concerns from 2 cities. One was the city of Augusta, which, as Representative Fleming mentioned, as a consolidated government, has the option to continue with 3 weeks. We also had the mayor of Lithonia on our call this morning suggest that bigger cities with more financial capability should have the option to go for 3 weeks if they so choose. But she understood the financial concerns of smaller cities, and that's a real issue that we're hearing from our members. Those many small cities across the state that are struggling with service delivery and providing just basic needs of municipal services.
So you wouldn't think it would be wise to poll your membership, 536 mayors, city councils across the state, to really get an idea as to where they are collectively?
It'd be highly unusual for us to do something like that, but we did do a survey that Representative Fleming mentioned. This was based on the 2009 costs and other factors that they had for their early voting. We haven't done one since, but we'd have to touch base with our research department to find out whether or not we can do this type of survey and be able to provide a resource as this bill moves through the legislative process.
Well, I just want you to know, I'm friends with a lot of these small-town mayors. I come from a small town. I have not heard from a single small-town mayor that they want to cut back on early voting anywhere in the state, including the mayor of Lafayette, whom I know very well.
Yes, she's terrific. She's on our Legislative Policy Council as well. And I'd suggest, I mean, have you also, I guess I'd pose the question, have you heard any cities that have expressed concerns about reducing these costs by reducing the term?
What I hear is people want to expand early voting rather than reduce it. That's
well,
what I hear.
And I understand that point completely, and I would suggest that Chairman Hamilton made the point very clear that that under the absentee ballot law that was adopted by the General Assembly many years ago, that time period is 45 days that in which you don't even have to leave your house in order to cast your vote. So that, to me, is a very expanded ability to vote that we have currently through the absentee ballot process, which has not changed.
I'm wondering if GMA would agree that we should just abolish early voting period. That would save a lot of money.
Well,
let's not have early voting period.
I'd prefer, Representative Brooks, to not deal with hypotheticals, but to keep the focus on what Representative Fleming is doing in his proposal to shorten the time frame from 3 weeks to 1 week. And I think it's important to consider the fact that this kind of cost issue was addressed by the legislature a few years ago,
2011, House Bill 92.
And I think Chairman Hamilton was the sponsor of that legislation. During that time, it was really a discussion about costs, and the county governments felt like they were spending inordinate amount of costs to hold these these elections. And the General Assembly ended up agreeing to shorten those days to what we've got now, which is 3 weeks. GMA was not a part of that so-called, I guess, what I would call a deal. We made the argument that we did not get traction on, that we are separate elections. We are odd years. We're nonpartisan. We should have a different consideration for municipal elections than are considered than for those congressional elections, gubernatorial elections, et cetera. So we didn't get our concerns addressed in that legislation, but it's the same type of concern at a much smaller, localized level.
Well, my recollection from 2011 was that GMA and ACCG did recommend the passage of House Bill 92.
Well,
I did not support it.
You know, I would defer to Chairman Hamilton, who can talk about the specifics of what deals were made, et cetera. But I can tell you that we made the pitch that we should have even shorter election time periods for early voting than county governments, which have a greater fiscal capacity, and we did not manage to get those concerns addressed through that proposal.
I just want to let you know this is my 34th year here, and I have received resolutions from GMA and ACCG on numerous occasions throughout my tenure on many issues. I'm finished, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Oliver.
I think this bill represents a very stark example of the differences in our district. I mean, I'm in a county of 700,000 people, a dozen cities, can't count the number, it keeps going up, and of 10,000, 70,000, 80,000 people sitting in a county that votes more than half early. It's a fascinating transition in a very short period of time to show that early voters is of what people want. I was fascinated to learn how quickly people adapted to early voters. Recognizing the cost of a small city and recognizing the inconvenience, though, doesn't change for me, obviously coming from my unique position, the reality of hundreds of thousands of people in DeKalb County preferring to vote early. And as we move our city lines in a very rapid rate across our county, the confusion between early and longer early voting is also a concern to me. I think I voted for 92, and I did because I saw it as a compromise. Whether or not compromise equals deal is a different question of it. But I did think it was a fair compromise, and I really didn't expect to come back this soon and reduce it quickly. I'm also interested to know that your survey is from 2009. I don't know. We didn't have how many cities we have in DeKalb now in 2009. So that it's hard for me to really analyze what the people in the cities, the large cities in DeKalb County, might want. And I represent 3 of the kind of middle-sized cities in Decatur. I mean, in DeKalb County, not the largest. By the end of the session, I might represent the largest, but that's. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Mosby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Fleming, have you talked to the City of Atlanta about this?
No, I have not.
Being the largest city in the state, probably would be nice to know what their thoughts are in terms of their citizens. The other issue, and I think Representative Oliver really touched on all of my points, but if you want to play in the city game, you just got to pay. You know, that's what folk want to local govern. It costs money to run a city.
Excuse me, members. Audience. We don't need any conversation.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else, Representative? Thank you. Representative Williamson.
Well, taking back to the people I represent over in Walton County, to the author of the bill, isn't it true that Walton County has 7 cities and 4 of whom have no property taxes at all?
I've heard you discuss that many times.
Well, I talked, I guess I need to put it frame in terms of a question. Isn't it true? I talked to the city manager of the city of Social Circle this morning, and isn't it true that it costs $75 per poll worker per day with a minimum of 3, which is $225 a day over 15-day early voting? It's approximately $3,400 out of the city treasury, and then with the runoff, it can effectively double that, which is what happened to them. They and other similar-sized cities in my district are desperate for some financial relief, given the fact that these are nonpartisan elections. So
that's exactly what I've heard.
All right. Any other discussion, or excuse me, any other questions or comments from the committee? Okay. What's the pleasure of the committee?
Madam Chair, will you be taking public testimony? We have several people that would like to speak.
Well, we did at the subcommittee.
Yes, ma'am, and we have more committee members. Not every member on the subcommittee is.
But this is the full committee.
Yes, ma'am,
and
we
I'm
would like to speak before the full committee.
But this is a 1-hour meeting, and we're 5 minutes over right now.
Yes, ma'am, but we are here as public to come out and testify on this bill. We have a lot
And I
of folks
truly believe that you are, but this is a full committee meeting. And I'm sorry, but we're here for an hour, and we're overtime now.
I didn't get to testify in the subcommittee, and I'd like to testify.
Well, I'm sorry you didn't. And there.
It was my understanding that many folks didn't get to testify, and on behalf of the members of the NAACP across the state of Georgia. This is a very important issue. I'm not aware of any study that has looked at the impact of what this might do post-Shelby. I'm also concerned that if we're talking about raising $3,400, it might be better for us to pass an act and keep early voting in place in cities than to destroy what is a very positive thing in many places.
Well, I encourage you then to work the members, if the bill passes at this point, to work the members of the House. This is a full committee meeting, and we did have a subcommittee meeting where members of this audience were heard about this bill. So at this point, would anyone on this committee like to make a motion?
Move to pass.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion by the members? All right, all in favor say aye. Those opposed, like sign. No. All right, it is House Bill 891 has passed, and it moves on to the Rules Committee. Meeting adjourned.